The judge's gavel struck the table, freezing the noisy atmosphere in the courtroom. Sitting in the center of the room, Sergeant Emily Harper, with one leg lost during a mission in Syria, and if her German shepherd hadn't rushed through a maze of mines to pull her out, she couldn't imagine what the outcome would have been. But today the dog was not allowed to sit beside her, and perhaps after this trial, Max would never be by her side again. Because the Army had deemed Max government property scheduled to be handed over to a private security firm for reassignment. Before you continue with the story, where in the world are you listening? Subscribe to the channel to see what happens next. The judge cleared his throat. Sergeant Harper, he began, his voice steady but not lacking resolve. This court understands your attachment to the animal, but the Army's regulations are very clear. Max is a military asset, and his reassignment has been approved. Do you have anything further to say before I deliver my ruling? Emily sat hunched in her chair, slowly standing up with one trembling leg and eyes sunken with grief. But her voice remained resolute, that of a soldier who had endured many battles. Your Honor, she said, her voice filled with emotion, Max is not just an asset. He saved my life more times than I can count. He dragged me to safety when I was bleeding out, stayed by my side when I couldn't face the world because of PTSD. He's not a tool. He's family. Please, if I can't keep him, at least let me see him one last time. Let me say goodbye. As she spoke, one of her hands touched the gleaming metals pinned to her chest, a reminder of the achievements Max had helped her earn, as well as the pain she had endured over the past year. The entire room fell silent, the weight of her plea hanging in the air. Spectators exchanged glances, some dabbing at tears, others nodding in quiet sympathy. The judge's expression softened for a moment, his gaze lingering on Emily's trembling hands. After a long pause, he nodded. Very well, Wayne, he said. I'll allow a brief meeting. Bring the dog in. The heavy wooden doors at the back of the courtroom creaked open, and Max appeared, led by a military handler. His sleek black and tan coat gleamed under the fluorescent lights. His ears perked, and his sharp eyes scanned the room. The moment he saw Emily, his tail gave a single hesitant wag, and he strained against the leash, his claws clicking on the polished floor. The handler released him, and Max bounded forward, leaping into Emily's arms as she dropped to her knees. Max, Emily whispered, burying her face in his fur, tears streaming down her cheeks. I'm so sorry, buddy. I tried so hard. Max whimpered, nuzzling her neck, his warmth a fleeting comfort against the cold reality of their impending separation. The courtroom watched in silence, the weight of the moment pressing down on everyone present. But then something shifted. Max's body tensed, his ears flicking back as he pulled away from Emily. His nose twitched, sniffing frantically at the sleeve of her jacket. Before she could react, he began to paw at it, his movements urgent, almost desperate. A low growl rumbled from his chest, and he tugged at the fabric with his teeth, his sharp barks shattering the solemn stillness of the room. Max, what's wrong? Emily asked, her voice trembling with confusion. The judge leaned forward, his brow furrowing. Control the dog, Sergeant, he said, a hint of irritation creeping into his tone. But Emily shook her head, her eyes locked on Max. He's not just barking, Your Honor. He only does this when he senses something important. The handler stepped forward, reaching for Max's leash, but the dog spun around, barking louder, his gaze fixed on Emily's jacket. The crowd murmured nervously, the tension in the room becoming suffocating. Emily hesitated, then reached into her sleeve, her fingers brushing against something cold and metallic. Her heart skipped a beat as she pulled it out, a small, sleek USB drive, its surface glinting in the light. Gasps erupted from the spectators. The judge's gavel froze midair, his eyes narrowing. "What is that?" he demanded, his voice sharp. Emily stared at the USB, her mind racing. I I don't know," she stammered. "I've never seen it before." The military handler's face paled, and he took a step back, his hands fidgeting nervously. A prosecutor in a crisp suit stood abruptly, his voice shaky. "This is irrelevant, Your Honor," he snapped. "It's not part of the proceedings. It could be planted." But Max barked again, his stance unyielding, his eyes darting between the USB and the handler. Emily's pulse quickened as she met the judge's gaze. "Your Honor," she said, her voice steadier now. "Max doesn't react like this for nothing. He's trying to tell us something. Please, we need to see what's on this drive." The judge leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. The room fell silent, every pair of eyes fixed on the tiny device in Emily's hand. Whatever was on that USB, it was clear Max had uncovered something no one expected, and it was about to change everything. The judge's eyes narrowed, his gavel still poised in midair. "Officer," he said, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade, "connect that device to the courtroom system. Now." His tone left no room for argument, though the prosecutor leapt to his feet, his face flushed with panic. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular," the prosecutor stammered, his voice cracking. "That device hasn't been vetted. It could be tampered evidence, a ploy to manipulate these proceedings." But his words faltered under the judge's steely glare, and the military handler shifted uncomfortably, his hands twitching at his sides. Emily's heart pounded in her chest, her fingers tightening around the USB. She didn't know how it had ended up in her jacket or what it contained, but Max's unwavering focus told her it was no accident. "Your Honor," she said, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions within her, "Max has never been wrong. If he found this, it's because it matters. Please let us see what's on it." The judge nodded curtly, motioning to the bailiff. The officer, a broad-shouldered man with a wary expression, took the USB and plugged it into the courtroom's secure laptop. The large screen behind the judge flickered to life, casting a pale glow across the room. Whispers rippled through the spectators, their anticipation palpable as the bailiff opened the drive's contents. A single audio file appeared, labeled only with a string of numbers. The bailiff hesitated, glancing at the judge for confirmation. "Play it," the judge ordered, his voice low but resolute. The room fell silent as the bailiff clicked the file. A faint crackle of static filled the air, followed by muffled voices. Everyone leaned forward, straining to hear. Then the words came, sharp and unmistakable, like a gunshot in the stillness. "Harper's a liability," a gruff voice said, its tone cold and deliberate. "She knows too much about the operation in Kabul. Get that dog out of her hands. It's too valuable to leave with her. Reassign it to the firm and make sure she doesn't talk." Gasps erupted across the courtroom. Emily's breath caught in her throat, her mind reeling. She recognized that voice. It belonged to Colonel Richard Vance, her former commanding officer, a man she had once trusted with her life. The second voice, smoother but equally chilling, responded, "And if she fights back? She's stubborn. She won't let the dog go quietly." "Then make it look like an accident," the first voice snapped. "The firm's paying us to keep this quiet. That dog's worth millions on the black market, trained to sniff out anything. Get it done." The audio cut off abruptly, leaving the courtroom in stunned silence. Emily's hands trembled, her eyes wide with shock. Max let out a single sharp bark, his body tense as if sensing the gravity of what had just been revealed. The spectators erupted into murmurs, some clutching their belongings, others whispering in disbelief. The prosecutor's face drained of color, his earlier objections forgotten as he sank back into his seat. The judge slammed his gavel, the sound echoing like thunder. "Order!" he bellowed, though his own voice betrayed a tremor of unease. He turned to the military handler, his eyes blazing. "You, explain this. Now." The handler stammered, his face slick with sweat. I, I don't know anything about this, Your Honor. I was just following orders to bring the dog here." But his nervous glance toward the prosecutor told a different story, and Max's growl deepened. His teeth bared as he took a step toward the man. Emily's mind raced, piecing together fragments of memories from her time in Afghanistan. The covert operations, the shipments she'd been told not to question, the sudden reassignment of her unit after Max had sniffed out something during a routine patrol. She had thought it was a mistake, a coincidence, but now the truth was staring her in the face. Max wasn't just a military asset. He was a threat to someone powerful, someone who wanted him silenced. "Your Honor," Emily said, her voice rising above the chaos, "this isn't just about Max. That audio, it's proof of something bigger. They're not just taking him because of regulations. They're trying to cover up a crime, and Max knows it." The judge's expression darkened, his fingers tightening around his gavel. He leaned forward, his gaze shifting from Emily to the prosecutor, then to the handler. "This court will recess immediately," he said, his voice firm. "Bailiffs, secure that USB as evidence. And someone get Colonel Vance in here for questioning now. And I want that USB analyzed by a forensic team within the hour." He slammed his gavel, the sound ringing like a gunshot. But his eyes lingered on Emily and Max, a flicker of respect in his gaze. As the bailiffs moved to comply, Max pressed closer to Emily, his warmth grounding her amidst the whirlwind of revelations. The courtroom buzzed with tension, spectators whispering frantically as the reality of the audio sank in. Emily reached down, her hand resting on Max's head, her voice barely a whisper. "You did it, buddy," she said, her eyes glistening with tears. "You're not going anywhere." But as the judge rose to leave, a shadow moved at the back of the courtroom. A man in a dark suit slipped through the doors, his face obscured but his movements deliberate. Max's ears flicked, and a low growl rumbled from his chest, his eyes locked on the retreating figure. Emily's pulse quickened. Whatever Max had uncovered, it was only the beginning, and someone out there was watching, waiting for their next move. As the courtroom began to clear, Emily's mind raced. The audio had confirmed her worst fears. Max wasn't just being reassigned for military purposes. He was a target, a valuable asset in a dangerous game of greed and corruption. She glanced down at Max, whose ears were perked, his sharp eyes scanning the room, as if sensing the danger wasn't over. The mysterious figure she'd seen slipping out of the courtroom doors haunted her thoughts. Whoever they were, they knew about the USB, and they weren't going to let this go quietly. The bailiff approached Emily, his expression grim. "Sergeant Harper, you and the dog need to come with us," he said. "The judge wants you in a secure location until we sort this out. It's not safe here." Emily nodded, her grip tightening on Max's leash. "Let's go, buddy," she whispered, her voice trembling but resolute. As they followed the bailiff through a side exit, Max suddenly stopped, his body tensing. A low growl rumbled from his chest, his gaze locked on a shadowed hallway leading to the courthouse's rear entrance. Emily's pulse quickened. "What is it, Max?" she asked, her eyes following his line of sight. Before the bailiff could react, A sharp metallic clang echoed down the hallway, followed by the faint sound of footsteps, deliberate, unhurried. Max's growl deepened, his hackles rising as he took a step forward, his claws scraping the tiled floor. The bailiff drew his weapon, his face pale. "Stay back, Sergeant," he warned, his voice tight with unease. But Emily knew Max's instincts too well to ignore them. "He sensed something," she said, her voice firm. "We need to check it out." The bailiff hesitated, then nodded, motioning for Emily to stay behind him. They crept toward the hallway, Max leading the way, his nose low to the ground. The air grew heavier with each step, the faint scent of something acrid lingering in the corridor. As they rounded a corner, Max froze, his body rigid, his growl turning into a series of sharp, urgent barks. There, tucked against the wall, was a small black duffel bag, its zipper slightly ajar. The bailiff's eyes widened. "Don't move," he whispered, kneeling to inspect the bag. His hands trembled as he carefully unzipped it, revealing a tangle of wires and a small digital timer blinking ominously. "It's a bomb," he said, his voice barely audible. "We need to evacuate now." Emily's heart pounded, her mind flashing back to Afghanistan, where Max's nose had saved her squad from hidden explosives. "Max knew," she said, her voice shaking with a mix of fear and pride. "He always knows." The bailiff radioed for the bomb squad, his voice urgent as he relayed the situation. Within minutes, the courthouse was a flurry of activity, sirens wailing outside as security teams swept in. Max remained by Emily's side, his barks guiding the bomb squad to the device. As the experts worked to disarm it, Emily's thoughts turned to the audio. The firm mentioned in the recording wasn't just after Max for profit. They were willing to kill to keep their secrets buried. As the bomb squad secured the device, the bailiff turned to Emily, his expression grim. "That USB wasn't just evidence," he said. "It's a death sentence. Whoever's behind this knows you and that dog are a threat. You're not safe until we find them." Emily knelt beside Max, her hand brushing over his sleek fur. "We've been through worse, haven't we?" she whispered, her voice steadying. But her eyes caught a flicker of movement at the end of the hallway, a figure in a dark coat, watching from the shadows before vanishing into the chaos. Max's growl returned, low and menacing, his body coiled as if ready to chase. The judge's voice crackled over the bailiff's radio. "Get Harper and the dog to a safe house immediately," he ordered. "And I want Vance in my chambers by nightfall." This conspiracy ends now. As Emily and Max were escorted out of the courthouse, the weight of the day pressed down on her. The audio had exposed a criminal network, and Max's instincts had saved countless lives. But the danger was far from over. Someone was still out there, pulling strings, and they wanted Max at any cost. Emily tightened her grip on his leash, her resolve hardening. "We're in this together, Max," she said softly, "and we're not backing down." The safe house loomed in the distance, a faint beacon of refuge, but Max's ears twitched, his gaze fixed on the darkening horizon. Whatever was coming next, he was ready, and so was Emily. The safe house was a stark contrast to the chaos of the courthouse. A small, dimly lit cabin tucked deep in the woods, its walls lined with peeling paint and the faint scent of damp earth. Emily Harper sat at a rickety wooden table, her hands clasped tightly around a chipped mug of coffee that had long gone cold. Max, her loyal German shepherd, lay at her feet, his ears twitching at every creak of the old floorboards. The events of the day, the USB, the audio, the bomb, played on a loop in Emily's mind, each memory sharpening her resolve but deepening her unease. The bailiff who had escorted them, Officer Daniels, stood by the window, his eyes scanning the dark tree line beyond. "The bomb squad's report just came in," he said, his voice low. "The device was military grade, rigged to take out half the courthouse. Whoever planted it wasn't just covering their tracks. They were sending a message." Emily's jaw tightened, her gaze dropping to Max. "They're after him," she said softly, her hand brushing over his sleek fur. That audio said Max is worth millions on the black market. He's not just a dog to them, he's a weapon. Max lifted his head, his intelligent eyes meeting hers as if understanding every word. Daniels nodded, his expression grim. "Colonel Vance is in custody, but he's not talking. The judge has ordered a full investigation into the private security firm mentioned in the audio. They're digging into financial records, but it's going to take time. Until then, you and Max stay here. No one knows this location." But Emily wasn't so sure. The shadowy figure she'd seen at the courthouse lingered in her thoughts, their deliberate movements a silent promise of more to come. She opened her mouth to respond, but Max suddenly stood, his body tense, a low growl rumbling from his chest. His ears flicked toward the door, his nose sniffing the air with urgent precision. "Max, what is it?" Emily asked, her pulse quickening. Daniel spun around, his hand resting on his holster. The cabin fell silent, the only sound the faint rustle of leaves outside. Then a sharp snap echoed through the night, a twig breaking underfoot, too close to be an animal. Daniels motioned for Emily to stay low, drawing his weapon as he crept toward the door. Max's growl deepened, his hackles rising as he positioned himself between Emily and the entrance. The air felt charged, every second stretching into eternity. Emily's heart pounded, her mind flashing back to Afghanistan, where Max's instincts had been the difference between life and death. The door rattled slightly, as if someone were testing the lock. Daniels raised his weapon, his voice a harsh whisper. "Identify yourself!" But the only response was silence, thick, oppressive silence that seemed to press down on the cabin. Max's barks erupted, sharp and relentless, his body coiled like a spring. Then a deafening crash shattered the stillness as the window behind Emily exploded inward, glass spraying across the room. A canister hit the floor, hissing as it released a cloud of thick, acrid smoke. "Tear gas!" Daniel shouted, coughing as he stumbled back. Emily grabbed Max's leash, her eyes stinging as she pulled him toward the back of the cabin. "We need to move," Max barked furiously, his nose guiding them through the haze as they stumbled toward a rear exit. Gunfire erupted outside, bullets pinging off the cabin's walls. Emily's chest tightened with dread. This wasn't a random attack. Whoever was behind the bomb at the courthouse had found them, and they weren't here to negotiate. They burst through the back door into the cool night air, the woods looming dark and impenetrable around them. Daniel fired back at the unseen attackers, his voice strained. "Get to the car!" he yelled, pointing to a dirt path where a vehicle was parked. Emily ran, Max at her side, his barks cutting through the chaos like a beacon. As they reached the car, Max suddenly spun around, his teeth bared as he lunged at a figure emerging from the shadows. The man, clad in black tactical gear, cried out as Max clamped onto his arm, forcing him to drop a silenced pistol. Emily froze, her breath catching as she recognized the man's face in the dim moonlight. It was the same figure she'd seen at the courthouse, his cold eyes glinting with malice. "Call off the dog," the man snarled, struggling against Max's grip. But Emily stood her ground, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. "Not until you tell me who sent you," she said. "What do they want with Max?" The man's lips curled into a smirk, even as he winced in pain. "You have no idea what you're up against," he said, his voice low and menacing. "That dog's a key to everything. Operations you'll never understand. Hand him over and you might live." Before Emily could respond, Daniels caught up, his weapon trained on the attacker. "On your knees," he ordered, cuffing the man as Max released his grip. But the sound of more footsteps crunching through the underbrush sent a chill down Emily's spine. "There's more of them," she whispered, her eyes darting to the trees. Daniels shoved the cuffed man toward the car. "We're out of time," he said. "Get in, now." Emily scrambled into the driver's seat, Max leaping into the back as Daniels pushed the attacker into the passenger side. The engine roared to life, and they sped down the dirt path, bullets grazing the car's frame as the attackers gave chase. As they raced into the night, Emily's mind churned with questions. The man's words echoed in her head. Max was a key to everything. The audio, the bomb, the attack. It was all connected to something far bigger than she'd imagined. She glanced at Max in the rearview mirror, his sharp eyes glinting with unwavering determination. "We're not done yet, buddy," she said softly, her resolve hardening. "Whatever they're hiding, we're going to find it." But as the car disappeared into the darkness, a faint red light blinked from beneath the vehicle, a tracking device planted by the attackers. The safe house was no longer safe, and the hunt for Emily and Max was only beginning. Would you like to hear more stories about veteran dogs like Max? If so, please like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next veteran dog stories.